Claude Monet. Claude Monet was a French artist who was called the father of Impressionism. What's Impressionism? Well, in the dictionary, the term impression means the idea or a feeling or an opinion about something. So it's not like an exact science. It's the way we think something looks or feels. And the idea of Impressionism for artists came along because they were starting to think about feelings rather than showing exactly how something looked. Like they were trying to break out of a still life painting, which is, maybe a bowl of fruit on the table, and portraits. People were trying to do something a little different. Photography was starting, and we no longer needed to show these things exactly the way they looked. And artists and other people were thinking more about feelings and expressing more abstract ideas. And that's where Impressionism came from. Now, the term Impressionism was used with Monet because he had a painting that was called an impression, sunrise, and critics called it Impressionism as an insult rather than a kind term. And he was okay with that. He continued working the way he was working, but they thought that what he was doing really wasn't an interesting thing. So, and what is Impressionism? What is Impressionism then, as far as painting? So it uses dabs of paint and loose brush strokes to give suggestions or suggestions of something rather than having it look exactly the way it looks in real life, like a photograph. Monet was very influential with artists like Edgar Degas, Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, as some of you know it. Auguste Renoir was another one, and Paul Cézanne was also influenced by him. And he was studying, Monet was studying and was really interested in the effects of light and seasons and how the changing seasons and the changing light affects what you see. And he was trying to show that in his art. So he would sit and he would study many different things just to see how the light changed and how the color changed. And he would do studies or multiple paintings of things based on what he saw. And there are many famous stories about how he would sit and watch that sun change. He would not only just do one painting, but he would have like, a row of 10 paintings that he would do at any given time and of the same thing. So he would sit and he would watch how the sun moved, and his assistant would change the canvas based on where the sun was. So he could then work as the sun was changing. And that was how he would get 10 different studies, which I think is kind of incredible. He would change the way reflection and shadow would happen in these paintings. Today we're going to focus more on reflection. And reflection is what things look like on water. And reflection is, you can think of it as water acting as a mirror. And when you add something and a mirror shows you the opposite, or it shows you another image of what you have over the top of it. And that's essentially what reflection is. And so you're adding not only color with your watercolor, or with the color of your water, and you're showing exactly what that image is, but it's going to be mirror image, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. It's said that Monet made light dance on water, and his colors danced on water. And the other thing about Monet was it wasn't just the seasons and the changing of the light that reflected his color, but he also was famously had cataracts in his eyes, which is where you have kind of scar tissue that covers your eyes. And it changed the way he saw color. And so he started painting very, very red, because that was how he was seeing color. So everything had a real reddish tone to it. When he had his cataracts removed, he said that he saw everything in a new light. And everything got painted very bright blues, because all of a sudden he could see blues. Now, some of you may know that Monet was known for his water lily paintings. That's what he's most famous for, are his water lily paintings. And that, of course, is on water. He's also known for doing trees that are on painted, the reflection on water. His famous bridge, the Japanese bridge from his garden, is painted on water. And he has a number of other things that are painted on water as well. He liked to paint what we call controlled nature. So he built his own garden where he could go out and see everything exactly what he wanted to see, and it never changed. And all of the things, or many of the things that he painted, were coming from his own garden, including the water lilies. He remade or bought a house outside of Paris, about half an hour outside of Paris, and built up this garden as to how he wanted to see it and what he wanted to paint. And it's still there today if you want to visit. It is a beautiful garden, depending on what time of the year you go. But regardless, so he loved going out into his garden and painting. So what we're going to do today is we are going to think about reflection. As we've already decided, reflection is the use of water as a mirror almost. So you're going to see the things as you would in your mirror. You need to start out with where the water and the land meet, because of course that is going to show us where we're going to place our whatever it is that's going to be reflected in the water. There are a lot of things that can be reflected in the water. Just simply trees. You do a tree and you've got, I'm just going to do just your basic tree here. And I'm going to do, he did the poplar trees, and the poplar trees are very tall. Gotta have 2 lines for my trunk, and I'm going to have that kind of go off. And I have 4. I don't like even numbers. We always want to have an odd number, so I'm going to add 1 right here on the side here that goes off my paper. So I've now got my trees here. I'm going to do some bushes here, just with my drawing, okay? So how is that going to be reflected in my mirror, right? And I don't know if this is going to work or not, but you can see how that needs to be reflected in my mirror. So I'm going to, and depending on where the sun is also, that's going to kind of affect my reflection too. So if my sun is right behind my trees, everything is going to go straight like this, right? Now if my sun is over here, my reflection is going to turn off to the side, right? Because my light source is coming from my corner out here and moving in this direction, right? So if I want my light source to be, let's say my sun is right off into the corner here, and I'm going to forget about this one right here. My trees and the reflection in the water is going to stretch out like this in my water, right? And also I have to have my bushes. If I do this, I have to have my bushes. I can't tell if it's actually showing or not, but my bushes are also going to be slightly reflected in my water. Okay, so everything, and it's a mirror image means that it's the opposite. So if you look at yourself in the mirror and you're wearing a shirt that says, I don't know, be kind, you're not going to see be kind. You're going to see Dnick Ebb, right? Because it's a mirror image. It's opposite or it's flipped. So the same thing is going to be true of my trees. I'm not going to do my trees like exactly the same from here up, right? So that is reflection. Now the other thing about water that's tricky that Monet did really well is you want to show movement in water. Whenever the wind blows, you end up with ripples in the water. So you want to slightly show that there are ripples in your water as well for movement. Okay, and it can go either direction. You can have it go this direction as well. So you show the movement in the water. And that's a really quick explanation of reflection. Now what if I want to do some color in here? Okay, I have, we talk about reflection in that you have, and I'm going to show you some examples, but we have this boat here, and all of the things that I've talked to you about are true. With this reflection, you can see that it is a mirror of my boat, or his boats here. This is a painting by Monet, and it's got the reflection, but you can see that the colors are broken up when he added his paint here. Also, he did, as we talked about, Impressionism is dabs or loose brush strokes of color. You can see he did that here as well. It's this fisherman right here. It is not an exact drawing of a fisherman. It's just the idea of the fisherman standing on the boat here, or the sailor, or whatever he is. And the same thing is true of these buildings here. He's just used some brush strokes to give us the idea of those buildings. So for my trees, I need to, and the other thing too is if, let's look at his poplar trees here. So his poplar trees, you can see he's almost painted the trees in opposite. They've got a little bit of blue in them in order to remind us that there is water. Here's one of his bridges, and obviously this is in his cataract phase because it's very red, and it may actually be in winter as well, or late fall, because it's very brown. But here is the reflection of his Japanese bridge here, along with you see these lines, all these little dash marks that kind of go in this direction are all the trees up here. So what I want to do is, when I do reflection, I like to have a little bit of blue in here. So we still have our water. And you can paint or use, I'm using markers just because, but you can also use your watercolor paint, and I'll do that. Here's this is actually with the markers. It is a nice way to remind us to have our movement, because it's going to leave behind those darker areas. And I've got, there's my water edge. And to add my reflection in here, got my watercolors. This time I'll use some watercolors. I want to first decide what color my trees are going to be. And if you know me, you know one color is not good enough for a tree. you need to add some interest and have a little bit of green in your brown or something. Now I'm going to add my foliage for my tree. And again, that's kind of boring. I'm going to add a little bit of blue in there. Actually, no, I'm going to add a little bit of red in there just to give it, well, now I got a little blue, I got a little red. So I now know what color I want. Red is better because I've already got blue water. Now I know what colors I'm going to use for my, you see how I kind of wiggle my lines? Don't do a straight line. If a straight line is not something that you will find in water ever, because even glass is still going to turn, glass water, water that looks like glass is going to have some sort of a movement to it. And all of my trunks are meeting up at the water's edge, of course. Now what about my bushes here? Forgot my bushes. I've got my bushes here. Just a little bit, and I've got my trees, and I remember I added a little bit of red in there. Oops, that was way too much red, but let's just add some water. There. Now I've got some reflection, and I'm missing some water over here, so I'm going to do that. Now, the one thing I didn't do was my sky. It's empty. It has no color in it. We talked about sun. This is a bright, shiny, sunshiny day, because my blues in my water are very bright. My trees are very bright. They're nice, bright, solid, or not solid, but bright colors. They're not muted colors or browned colors like you would find if you didn't have any sunshine. So I'm going to add some yellow in my sky first. So I have some sunshine and I know where that's coming. Now, sunshine reflected on water? Of course it is. And what happens when we have a little bit of yellow with our blue? We're going to have some greenish colors in here, which is just fine. And I can now do another little bit of blue in the background here. And I like it to be lighter. I think it's more realistic when it's a lighter blue. The higher up your sky is, the darker the color. I'm pretty sure that's the way it goes. But I like to use my light blues in the background. So now I've got my reflection. And that is Claude Monet. Claude is French, but Claude Monet Reflection. The next time we meet, we are going to be just talking about Monet a little bit further, and we're going to be talking about shadow. And reflection is when your light shines an image onto your water, and shadow is when light is taken away or removed because it's covered. So we'll talk about shadow the next time we meet, and I can't wait to see you then.